Right. Okay. You haven't seen my price yet. So anyway, so here's where we are. Not only do we have to pay all this money, Gary Kell's money's already spent, NAO's money is coming 200 million now and 100 million for the next 2 years. Not only do we have to pay all that money, but we have to agree to certain things. And you have no choice in this because Keller Williams is, well, not Keller Williams is agreeing. NAR has agreed, everybody is a member of NAR. You're a member of an MLS. You don't, if you want to withdraw from the Lehigh Valley MLS, you don't have to. Okay, but you got to see in the Lehigh Valley MLS because it's got to do business. So here's what we agreed to do. Okay, we agreed to never show a house to any buyer without first having a written agreement with that buyer. For us, it's a buyer agency contract. Not only do you have to have a written agreement with the buyer, but it has to have a clearly ascertainable fee, an amount stated in that agreement. It could say 3%, it could say 2.5%, it could say $10,000, it could say $5,000, it could say $495. You cannot charge a buyer a fee unless before you show them the house, you have the written agreement. And showing them the house includes FaceTiming them and showing if they're somewhere else. Called touring a house. And right in the settlement agreement, they wrote that that type of touring of a house counts as touring. They use the word touring a house. You have to have a written agreement with a buyer. That's huge. We're going to talk a lot about that when we get the forms in a few minutes. Okay. The other big piece is that the MLSs no longer can advertise in the MLS any cooperative compensation being offered. Cooperative compensation is still legal till maybe the Justice Department decides it's not. Stay tuned for that part of this. But right now, cooperative compensation is still legal, but it can't show up in the MLS. It can't be linked to anything in the MLS. It can't be hinted to in the MLS. It can't be on the seller's disclosure, which is in the MLS. It can't be on the sofa pillow that's in the picture of the living room that's in the MLS. It could be on the sofa pillow, but not on the picture that appears in the MLS. Okay? You could open the lockbox and find a tag on the key saying what it is. Or you could have a sign on every one of your sales signs, kind of one of these. Buyer agent paid. The words have been chosen carefully. One of my agents said, I don't like buyer agent paid. I want to change it to buyer agent compensate. I said, go right ahead. It's the same thing. Now,
yes.
Yeah, put it on everybody. Well, maybe not. We got to get to that. Provided your seller allows you to offer cooperative compensation in your listing contract. Buyer agent paid. Now, does anybody have a sense of symmetry? What's wrong with this sign writer? What's wrong with it? It's not sensitive. There's a space at the end. You could, if your broker allows, put a little sticker that says 3%, 2.5%, whatever the number is. Or you could do like the brilliant Christina Cardone, my daughter, came up with this on. We're going to hopefully roll with it. We're figuring out how to get the stickers. A QR code. And when you click on the QR code, before I tell you what's going to happen, you click on the QR code, watch this. When you walk into the listing that has this on the sign right outside, or not, on the dining room table or kitchen counter is going to be a stack of pre-signed cooperative compensation agreements signed by you, the listing agent, letting the consumers know and the agents know who are showing the property that if they buy the property, you're paying them X 0.5% cooperative company. Pre-sign. Take one. All they have to do is sign it and send it back to you. That's the form that always came from the buyer's agent. Now it's going to come from the listing agent. Not only that, you're going to take a picture of that form and keep it on your phone. So when they call you up or text you, are you offering cooperative compensation? If so, how much? You're going to take out your phone and you're going to go boom, and you're going to send them a picture of their cooperative compensation agreement. You're allowed to do that. Okay, I encourage you to do it, provided your seller allows you to offer cooperative compensation. All you're doing is doing exactly what the MLS did, right? It showed X 0.5% when you open the MLS up, right? Okay, well, now you don't have that. So now you got to get that information or give it some other way. So we have some other ideas how you're going to give and get that information. Now remember, we're going to talk about this from the listing agent's point of view. We're going to talk about it from the buyer's agent's point of view. Got a lot to talk about. That's why I'm billed from 2 to 4. I've already killed an hour without even showing you one form. 2 to 5. Oh, where? I got until 5.
Dominic, I know you asked for 2, but I gave you 3.
Okay, you see what I say? When I was in high school, I learned about the different, what do you call it, stages, solid, liquid, and gas. And one of the things we learned was that a gas would take up volume-wise, would take up as much volume as you gave it. Okay, like you have an ice cube and it's this big, it's there, but if you turn it into a gas, it occupies the entire room. I'm a gas. So when it comes to time,
that's why I didn't tell you that. That's why I didn't tell you.
I can do whatever time you give me. I'm glad I have that amount of time.
Yeah.
This is being recorded. Okay, yeah, that's my wife talking back there. Okay. She's a okay. Anyway, this is good because I'm an hour in and I've completed the foundation that we all need to understand before we start the discussion of what we did with forms to accommodate these changes. So, here's another twist. This is not a big one, but some people in our organization are making a big thing about it. I'll do it right now. Remember, you have to have a buyer agency contract with the amount of your commission. Okay. If you receive more than that, you can't retain it. What's going to happen? Well, it's going to go back to the buyer, or maybe you can renegotiate with the buyer, and the buyer may allow you to keep it, but he would have to sign a new buyer agency contract. I'm a little concerned about the date. We're going to talk about electronic forms dating before it's out right now. It's nice if you're going to date something before today, when you're signing it today, it's good to use paper and a pen as opposed to DocuSign, which you can't trick DocuSign. Okay, they know when you sign it. And who's going to be policing this? Well, we're going to be policing it in our internal compliance. We're not going to pay anyone a commission on the buy side unless they have a buyer agency contract with an amount filled in it. And that amount has to be the same amount or greater, because you're allowed to take less than you say. You can tell a buyer 3%, but you can accept 2.5%. That's up to you. You've always been allowed to do that, right? So you're going to think, I'm changing this because I'm going to start with the buyer agency contract right now. You probably want to get every buyer you work with to sign a buyer agency contract for 3%. And then maybe you can wink, wink. If I get less than 3, I'll pay. Well, how much less? 25 cents? No. Because the buyer is responsible to pay the difference. Our existing buyer agent, the existing one, the old buyer agency contract says that, and the new buyer agency contract says they're responsible to pay you the difference. So we have to do this. Now, here's the part I'm going to explain. And half of the people in this room are not, 2 hours from now, they're not going to understand. I can't help it. Okay. I don't know if it's this side of the room that's not going to understand it, or it's this side of the room. But God bless half the people in this room that are going to understand what I'm talking about. Because if you don't understand what I'm about to talk about, you're never going to be able to do some of the things I just talked about. Which is paid and cooperative compensation. Okay, here it is. There are 3 sources of a buyer agent getting paid. There are only 3 ways a buyer agent can get paid. Name one of them. That's the last. Can we do something before that? Ready? Okay, actually, cooperative compensation is the most common one that's been done for years for the whole country. So one way is cooperative compensation. But we don't know what cooperative compensation is.
No.
No, we've never known what cooperative compensation is. Because this misunderstanding that I said is gonna happen is about to rise. So the other two ways a buyer agent can get paid is one by the buyer directly. Can a buyer pay commission directly? Does a buyer ever pay us money directly? Yeah, all the time. We get that extra little fee, $2.95, $3.95, $4.95, $6.95, whatever we charge. You're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. We don't tell you what you can put in that amount on the buyer agent's contract or the listing contract, the one that comes after the percentage amount. Okay? If you do that, we're gonna talk about how you do that correctly. Not a new topic, an old topic. We've always needed to know how to do that correctly. On the old buyer agency contract or the listing contract for that matter. It says a percentage amount and then a dollar amount. Okay. But what was I gonna say?
The
The
second
second way to
broker.
get paid.
We're paid by the broker.
Oh, yeah, you're paid by the buyer or you're paid by the seller. Okay, let's review our three ways. See, most sellers think there are only two ways. Most buyers think there are only two ways. 99% of all the buyers and all the sellers in the country think there are only two ways to get paid. They think either the buyer pays or the seller pays. But we know there's a third way. But here's the thing, I believe in my heart that 90% of all the agents in this country, all 50 states, including Washington, D.C., Guam, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, there's 54 of them. I believe that most of those agents believe there's only two ways to get paid. Because in the discussions that we see, and in the education that we see, even some attorneys think there's only two ways. I think the settling attorneys, in some ways, think there's only two ways. There are three ways that we get paid. One is by the buyer, the other is by the seller, and the other is by cooperative compensation, but we don't know what that means. So what is cooperative compensation? Anybody?
So
I'll do it. I'll do it. It's when the listing broker pays another broker to bring a buyer that buys the house. That's how you've been paid if you're old enough for 70 years, for 60 years, for 50 years, for 40 years, for 30 years, 20, 10 years, 5 years, 5 months. I don't care how long you've been in this business. When you sell a listing, a Remax of Century 21, that's how you get paid. How do you know how much you're getting paid? You look in the MLS, it shows you what the cooperative compensation, that's the word. It's not seller compensation. It's cooperative compensation. Yes, look at me like I'm strange. The difference between cooperative compensation and seller pay compensation. Sellers think they pay either one of those. They don't even hear the difference. Most of us in the industry don't even hear the difference. We now need to hear that difference in a big, big way because our listing contracts are going to explain that. Our agreement of sale is going to explain it. Okay, our buyer agency contract is going to explain it. Not only that, our notice of policy change form, the top form you may have on your handout, is going to explain that issue. Now, I was given the privilege a few months ago to be invited to join, I think we were 10 of us, give or take, a task force made up of realtors from throughout the state of Pennsylvania to serve on a standard forms task force to create all the changes that were needed to accommodate the settlement agreement, which goes into effect on August 17th. So I served on the task force that created every one of the red changes. If we can see them in red, we're going to see. I served on that task force. Closely serving on that task force is the chief counsel for the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, Hank Werner, my good friend, and his associate counsel, Casey Klauser. Okay, she says she's fantastic. They're both fantastic. They helped us create the changes that would, just like all the forms you use, the agreement of sale, the listing contract by agents contract, pre-settlement possession, then the post-settlement possession, all those forms, there's like 100 of them, that you take for granted maybe, come to you as a member benefit, that's why you pay dues every year, from the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. I've been instrumental and very involved in that process for 35 years. I've been chairman of the committee quite a few years, and most recently, my own daughter, Christina, was chairman of the committee, the Standard Forms Committee at the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. She was jealous that I got on the Uber task force, that's what they called it, to create these changes, and she wasn't, because they have some silly rule that they only want one Cardone on the task force. You can't take that. But believe me, my daughter Christina tells me how to keep the straight and narrow and what to do all the time. I can't sell a house without her. She leads our family team. Okay, so here we are. Do we understand the difference between a seller paying a buyer's agent and cooperative compensation paying a buyer's agent? And that compensation is paid by the listing broker. Okay, and so many of the rules of the MLSs and the Code of Ethics and the National Association of Realtors deal with this issue of cooperative compensation, the whole concept of procuring cause. Okay, that you really procure the buyer that buys the house so that you're entitled to the cooperative compensation. Okay, now, this is going to be even harder for everyone to understand. This is where I lose 80% of the people. I just lost 50% of you, but now I'm going to lose 80%. There is no cooperative compensation on in-house transactions. When you sell a Keller Williams real estate listing here in Northampton County and you work here at Keller Williams Real Estate in Northampton County, there is no cooperative compensation. Okay, no. It's called seller paying a listing commission. There is no cooperative compensation in that amount. So if a seller's giving you 5%, 6% to sell the house, and someone here in Keller Williams, Northampton County, sells that house, there is no buyer agent compensation being paid. I told you I would lose you. 90% of your brain just checked out. You said, Dominic, that makes no sense. You have two heads on. Huh, yeah. So I helped bring buyer agency to the state of Pennsylvania in 1989 and 1990. You guys weren't born yet. Okay. And people would say to me, how is a buyer agent going to get paid? We used to only work for the sellers and get paid that way. And I said, you never know. Maybe mortgage lenders will allow you to mortgage the buyer agent's compensation. I said that 35 years ago. And they looked at me like I had three heads. Now pay attention. When I say it today, you look at me like I have two heads. Don't be surprised what the future holds. In fact, there is even a way today for a buyer to finance their buyer agent fee if they have enough money or they get a larger mortgage and then they have money to pay their buyer's agent indirectly. But we're going to talk about mortgage rules today as well. So, are there any questions about anything I said before I get into the forms that are going to show us these settlement agreement changes that are being made? And we're going to look at forms by looking at the old form in black and white with the new words added in red and the old words crossed out. And if you see anything appear in blue, it's the same old words, but they've been rearranged. So anything in black or blue, I'm not going to address because you're supposed to know that stuff already. You don't always know it, but we'll do that some other time. I'll come back anytime.
So just to clarify,
Yes.
so the buyer pays direct. The,
Hardly ever, but yes.
right,
the cooperative compensation, that means that the listing broker collects the fee from their seller
Right,
and gives it to the buyer's broker,
right,
and the buyer's broker gives it to the buyer's agent.
correct.
Or,
When I use buyer's agent, it's the same as buyer's broker.
okay,
We read the buyer agency contract and the listing contract, it says, these contracts are between the seller and the broker, not the licensee, not the designated agent, or between the buyer and the broker, not the designated agent. Keep going.
okay, and then the third is, well, in your order, the second is the seller pays the listing commission,
Hey, yes,
right? And that only happens,
you might say the seller pays the buyer's agent's commission.
sorry, yeah, thank you.
Yes.
And that only happens when it's within the same brokerage,
No,
or no?
Yeah,
I'm
I
asking,
didn't say,
that's the question.
I didn't say that at all.
No, I know you didn't.
So the only time the seller is gonna pay the buyer's agent directly is when it's a term of the agreement of sale.
Mhm.
Negotiate. You're gonna see in a little while, an agreement of sale that has a place on it for the seller to pay the commission. Now, the only time I bring up the agreement of sale, my daughter Christina says, Dad, start with the agreement of sale, not with the buyer agency contract. I told PAR, start with the agreement of sale, not with the buyer agency contract, but since I've been teaching it, I'm starting with the buyer agency contract. So here's the story. Okay? If you are a buyer's agent, you're gonna sign this contract with a buyer, hopefully asking for 3%. Okay? And if when you are writing the offer up on the house the buyer wants, and you have a cooperating broker compensation agreement in your hand from the listing broker from Century 21. Okay? It's same old, as long as it's an amount that's good enough, hopefully it's the same number you have. You got X 0.5% on your buyer agency contract, the cooperating broker compensation agreement, which is coming back. And a whole new life, you're gonna use it in every single transaction where cooperative compensation is offered. You never needed it before, you know why? You had the MLS printout. But you don't have the MLS printout, so now you need the cooperative compensation agreement.
Do I still need to put that into the agreement of sale?
No, it never goes in. In fact, the top of it says this is not part of the agreement of sale. You have it, you don't have to worry. I'm gonna get to it, you're jumping ahead. Okay, so if you do not have a cooperative compensation agreement in your hand when you're writing the buyer's offer, okay, and the buyer agrees that he doesn't want to have to write a check out to us at settlement, or put on the settlement sheet. He doesn't want to pay directly. Remember, that's one of the three ways. The buyer can say, yes, let's ask the seller to pay my fee. As part of the agreement, you're going to see the place where you fill that in on the agreement in a little while.
And I think to answer Joanna's question, when it's an in-house.
I didn't get the,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You didn't forget.
yeah. We're jumping ahead with that question. I was going to get to it
We're
eventually.
coming back to,
We'll definitely come back to it, but I'll do it now. Ready?
well, you brought.
If you know that the listing agent in your company has a listing contract that has 5, 5.5, 6% on it, you don't need to put anything on your buyer agency contract. See, I'm jumping ahead, but you're going to ask me this question. Ready? Here's the question you're going to ask. In about 2 weeks, or even tomorrow, you're going to get a call from a buyer, and they're going to want to see a listing. There's a good chance that that listing is with Keller Williams Real Estate, Northampton County, correct?
Yeah.
They're not exactly calling you to go see a Century 21 listing, unless they're already your client. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a new client, okay? If they're asking you to show them, this is so far ahead in the seminar, but if they're asking you to show them a Keller Williams Real Estate listing, this makes it so hard. And you're here, you can actually have them sign a non-exclusive buyer agency contract. And you can fill in 0 for the amount they have to pay if they buy the house. Because the seller has agreed to pay us 5 or 6%.
How do we know that?
That's the problem. I say unless you know that. So now, if you don't know it, how are you gonna know it? Call or text the guy sitting next to you right now. They don't know who the answer, right? We know. Okay, so if you don't know it, fill in 3% on the buyer agency contract and fill in 3% for the seller to pay. I dare say, if you get the seller to agree to pay you as a buyer's agent 3% on the agreement of sale, and he's already agreed to pay 6% on the listing contract, Keller Williams Real Estate, Northampton County. Or Allentown, for you Allentown people, I don't mean to exclude Allentown. Yeah, get what I mean? If you know that, so the seller is now obligated to pay the buyer's agent 3%, which is Keller Williams Real Estate, Northampton County. The seller is already obligated to pay 6%. And there is no cooperative compensation happening, because that's only when one broker pays another broker, right? There is no other broker in my story. Right? So the seller is obligated to pay 6, and now he's obligated to pay 3. It adds up to 9. That mistake, I promise you, is gonna happen next month. And you know what you're gonna do at settlement? You're gonna take 6 from the seller, and nobody's gonna know you screwed up. Because if you let them know you screwed up, the only solution is to take 9 from the seller. And I don't think you got the guts to do that. Okay? All right, so I'm not concerned about the screw up, but I'm explaining to you that there is no cooperative compensation on in-house transactions. And that, my friends, I can say it until I'm blue in the face, 80–90% of the realtors in this country don't get it. 80–90% of the people in this room don't get it.
I'm still confused though. So
Yeah, go ahead.
if not, all right, so listing agent at Keller Williams Northampton is receiving 6%.
Right.
And I.
Not the listing agent.
No,
The brokerage company is receiving 6%.
The brokerage is receiving.
And the listing contract is between the seller and the brokerage company. It says it on the listing contract. I'll show you the words in a couple
No,
minutes.
my question is, how do we know that it's what the division of that 6% is going to be?
Oh, I love that question. That's what team leaders get paid for. Called office policy. So what are you gonna do if there's a total of 6% paid by one of your sellers and another agent sells it? How much are you gonna give to the listing broker, assuming, let's assume they're both capped out. How much are you gonna give to the listing agent? 3%. He may say, I want 3.5. They say, too bad. You're getting 3. He may say, I want 4. He'll say, too bad, you're getting 3. This is what ALCs are for. Okay? And then the buyer's agent's gonna get 3. And the listing agent's gonna get 3. It's internal company policy. It has nothing to do with cooperation. Now, a hint, here's a hint. If you find out that the house that you're showing in-house, a buyer that you have, and you're not charging the buyer anything. By the way, you might have to fill in the buyer agent's contract with $395 if normally you would fill it in with 3% plus $395. But I'm trying to make it easy for you to get the buyer to sign the contract. Last I checked, buyers don't hesitate to sign contracts to get services and not have to pay for them. Okay?
Somebody's got.
Yes.
Understand sort of that Keller Williams, what they say, is 6%. But if you're talking to a seller and your listing contract is not, what is it, 5%?
Then it's 5%. Then it's 2.5, 2.5. In-house.
As long as that's office policy.
As long as that's office policy.
Is it? Is it?
No, I thought we.
I don't know. I didn't make you office policy. What are they gonna do? The listing agent gonna say, no, I get 5, he gets 1? There is no document addressing this. But there is no cooperative compensation in that document. We're gonna look at the listing contract in a little while, and we're not gonna see anywhere it addresses division of commissions in-house. Okay. But I was about to say that, Jim. I was about to say, if you know, okay, so you just hired me here at Keller Williams Real Estate, Northampton County. I have a listing, and I have a 6% listing. And on the dining room table, I have that I'm giving the other broker 2.5%. You, the buyer's agent from Keller Williams Real Estate, Northampton County, are gonna see that. That may be that's the policy you're saying you're gonna adhere to. You're gonna give internally whatever the agent was willing to give externally. Yeah, what if, we're gonna get there, what if the agent wasn't giving anything external? I'm jumping ahead, but you are gonna see in your marketplace, and you're gonna do it in this room, you're gonna take listings from sellers for 2.5%.
Right.
You're gonna take a listing from a seller for 2.5%, and you're not gonna offer any cooperative compensation.
Now,
And then someone from your office is gonna wanna show the house. It's important that they have a buyer agency contract filled in with 3%. Let's get there. Let's build on this one form at a time.
And then in that circumstance, it would be the buyer who would be paying the buyer's agent.
That's correct.
Okay.
The only reason the buyer doesn't have to pay is because he's got a buyer agency contract that has 0 in it.
Right, but, and I'm just looking at the listing contract, there still is in paragraph 6, a place where that will.
Allow you to do that. We're gonna get there. We gotta get to that. We gotta get to
I thought
each of
we
these
were
contracts
eliminating that.
one at a time. Okay? Unless someone said you're eliminating 6A, I don't think so.
Oh,
Jim, you never told them not to offer cooperative compensation, right? But have you discussed how you're gonna market that cooperative compensation?
So, hold on, Sharon, what? In the back, what's the chatter? What's the
What's the
confusion?
question?
What's the confusion? So, so I think this is becoming.
It's becoming hard. Let's do the forms. Ready? Buyer agency contract on the screen. Okay. The only change to the agreement of sale happens on page 2 of the agreement of sale. The only red you're gonna find is on page 2. Now, this is actually pretty easy, okay? All right, now, when you go to sell a house today, when you receive an offer today, paragraph 3, which has been there for years, and paragraph 3 has for years had 3B on the form. 3B is your traditional seller assist. And you haven't been using it much in the past 5 years, right? It's been such a seller's market. But if the seller is FHA and the seller will give you a 3% seller assist, that's where it would be. 3B, closing cost assistance. Seller will pay the following amount towards buyer's closing costs other than a broker's fee payable to broker for buyer as permitted by the mortgage lender, if any. Seller is only obligated to pay up to the amount or percentage which is approved by the mortgage lender, and you fill it in. Those words have been there for years. Okay, I have an agent, she's now 90 years old, she's retired, and I take care of her. She's in a